It's like, okay, guys, we're going kind of live, and I want to know where y'all are at. Okay? All right. Moving on. So last week was really cool, Tina, because I think it was. Kayla can say better than me because we were able to see where our gifts have been operating in the marketplace in ways we didn't know.
Okay.
And what we did is we went through each of the gifts, and we're actually down to the established order. But one of my favorite stories was actually Kayla's on her operating in the gift of faith to buy the firehouse and then your house. Mm-hmm. And realizing, oh wow, that was the gift of faith. So that's pretty cool.
So Lynez and I walked out, and we were sitting out front, and we started talking about me resigning from the board.
Yeah.
You're resigning from the chamber board?
Yeah, she resigned.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I resigned.
When did you do that?
A few months ago.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
January.
It was official January, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, I said, you know what? I think that was the gift of faith. Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do next. I'm supposed to do something.
Yeah.
I don't know what it is yet, but I knew this was no longer, like, I'd served my purpose here.
Yeah. Yeah. And you knew it was time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
So it could have been, I actually wondered if it was that, but also wisdom.
Yeah.
Because I bet there was some wisdom operating too on just how you want your life to look and how to get it to that point.
Yeah.
And so you might have been operating in wisdom too.
Good point.
Yeah. So
we thought about that a lot this week.
Yeah.
Since that study.
Yeah. It's just neat to see, like, even this morning with my client, he's like, how did you know what you were called to? And I said, trial and error. You know, life is like research and development. You just, I said, but I always had some clues. I knew business from the time I was little, but I didn't know it was a call until later. And I studied the word and realized, I said, but I've got some other things I've not yet accomplished. You know, that's why I started my business, was to get me there. And he said, I just don't know what my call is. And I said, well, let me tell you the gifts I see you operating in that you may not be aware of. And so one of the ones is he is an encourager and promoter. So if he finds, you know, anyone that they got a new business or they're friends and he wants to get word out, or really anything, he will encourage and he'll promote. And I told him, I said, that is the gift of encouragement. Leadership is one of them, you know. So I told him, I said, I can get you the assessment so you can figure out exactly what you're operating in. But I said, just start with what you wanted to be when you grew up, or start with your gifting, start with what you really love. And he said, if I could do this, I'm like, that's what it is.
Yeah.
He's like, racing cars. Yeah. I mean, God can use anything for a ministry. You know
what's funny though, Sherri, is when I did mine and you were asking me about mercy because it doesn't fit in with my personality. But if you remember when we did the personality thing, you were confused by that too. But that's because I was answering part of the questions with my business hat on, and then answering part of the questions with my ministry hat on, because I was chairing a ministry at the time.
Yeah.
So it's like this, you know, back and forth, and you know, some of that transfers over. You know, some ministry stuff you're going to use in business, but not everything. You know, you're going to have probably more mercy and compassion on a ministry board than you're going to have on a regular, you know, business board.
Right.
Because motivations are different, the way people respond to you are different.
Yeah.
But I think I am a walking contradiction.
You might be. And you know what was crazy is you almost didn't get interviewed.
Really?
Based on your assessment. I told him, I said, she doesn't have the personality for the position. And
that is funny. Yeah.
And then when Lee said, well, I think it's still worth an interview. And I said, you know, that's wisdom. Yeah, let's go ahead and interview her. And then the minute I seen you, I was like,
you're like, you've been lying to me.
Why'd you lie to me?
I'm like, but I was answering as I was going through it. I would just, different hats kept going, you know.
No, yeah, you want to answer it in the context, yeah.
You would have sworn I was a D, but I'm the same way. Like, my mom and wife personality is different than my business personality.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. I mean, I'm definitely a DC, and even in home I can have those strong traits, but I'm more relaxed, I'm more kicked back. Yeah. Okay, so you can, oh,
sorry, let
okay.
me turn that off.
So you can go through these, but I am curious on, because I didn't bring my iPad, on your gifts, so you had mercy.
Mercy, faith, and what was the other one? I'd have to go look. Those are the
administrative.
Was it
No.
admin?
I don't think. No,
I feel like everybody's was, so that was a guess.
There were a lot of
Maybe I'll
admin.
just go. Let me go get it.
Yeah,
'cause
go
it's gonna
grab
bug
it,
me.
because
I'll be right
if
back.
there's one that's on the list, we'll just hit it real fast and then
Okay.
get to the next, because the next won't really take that long. Let me see. That's funny. So what do you think you are at home? Are you like a S? Are you kicked back, or are you more still a go-getter?
No, I'm much more kicked back.
Okay.
And I tend to let them overrule me.
Defer.
I don't know if that's because I'm in a household of all men, but I'm like, they're like, where do you want to go eat? I really don't care. When I say I really don't care, I'm going to go wherever you want to go. I do not care.
Yep. You know, and I am very accommodating as well at home. Now, if I know, like if I've been craving like a salad from, Cotton Patch or something, and they're like, do you want to go do you want to order it from anywhere? Yep.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like wherever, as long as I can eat the food. I mean, if you get, burgers, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I'll eat rice and tuna. But I am too. I'm more accommodating than I am. And part of it could be too, when you're in your profession, you're making decisions, you're in that role as a DC, and so it's nice to, I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever.
It was discernment. That was the third one.
Discernment. Okay.
Yeah, and I know that one because I know when something's off.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so when you think about that, like, how does it show up in the marketplace? How does it show up in your, like, how are you using that gift in that area?
So I'll give you one example. We had somebody that we were working with that had actually been working with Chase for a couple years before I got here.
Yeah.
So when I got here, we were a lot further along than when he was with Chase. So Chase didn't, even though he was working with him, didn't really know much about him.
Yeah.
So I was working with him, and then I had went out and I had found him this great big investor who I know that, kind of put my name on my neck out for him. And then somebody mentioned something that they were concerned about something that they had heard with him. So I went and I filed an IPRA with the Attorney General to see if there was anything filed on him. Mm-hmm. And at the time, they came back and they said no. So I said, okay, well, something doesn't still, something's still not right.
Yeah.
Well, about 3 days before he and the investor were getting ready to seal the deal, I filed another IPRA, and this time it showed up.
Okay.
And it basically showed that he had taken another investor, put him on a bank account that he had opened, said he was going to take his name off of it, but then as soon as the money went in, he started writing checks and using a debit card to pull the money out. And so as soon as I knew, and I had proof that something had happened, I went to my investor and said, here's where we're at.
Yeah.
And then that investor, still wanting to see the project go forward, was actually considering still doing business with him. Had they, if they could bring somebody in, because he wanted the technology for oil and gas is what he wanted. But I told him, I said, in my opinion, I said, unless you have somebody with that industry specific knowledge, you don't know that the money he's telling you he needs for this, and this is actually going to what it's,
supposed to
go to.
Yeah.
So that whole deal ended up falling apart within days. But I just knew I needed to, really dig and do some research, and just had a feeling something wasn't right.
Yeah, I like that. That's a perfect example. And I mean, it saved me from working with people that would have been a nightmare several times. Others I can go in knowing, like, if there's nothing as far as like legalities or theft, there's just character traits that I know are going to irritate me, or personality stuff.
This is why I prefer in-person meetings, because eye contact and, the way someone's responding to you.
Yeah. And then you had the faith deal. And so the only thing that I would say is we discussed how the gift of faith is different from, because that was another one of your gifts, right? Faith?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That it's different from, like, your everyday faith, that we strengthen by the word, we strengthen by exercising it. This faith is just there. Like, you cannot be talked out of it. So I think, Kaylee, you said when you went into that house, you weren't even going to look for you, right? Your house?
No, that was Linez.
Oh, okay.
So mine, we lived in a house that was a block away. I mean, we're on 40 acres, so it's not a block away, but
It's
I could
close.
see this house from my house.
Yeah.
And I started telling Corey, that house is going to go into foreclosure, and I want to buy it. And he was like, okay, whatever. I even wrote a letter to the owner saying, before you go into foreclosure,
let me know.
Let me buy your house.
Now, did you know they were going into foreclosure by natural knowledge, or were you had a feeling?
I just had a feel like I was just watching the progression of things going on over there, and I was like, and they had moved out, and I was like, it's going to go into foreclosure.
Yeah.
So, I wrote her a letter asking to buy it before she went through that process.
Yeah.
Never heard anything back. I don't know if the letter got to her or not.
Yeah.
I have no idea. And finally, it went into foreclosure, and I told Corey, I was like, I want to buy that house. It was on our anniversary, and he's like, call and place a bid. So I placed the bid on our anniversary, and we closed on my birthday.
Yeah.
6 weeks later. So
yeah.
And I was just like, that's our house. Yeah.
And you know that with wisdom comes obviously wealth, and so wisdom was operating this morning at Lowe's. You know what I mean? Like that's wisdom in operation.
Because Corey and I on Saturday were at Lowe's, and I said, I want these Roombas. I'm going to see if they'll give me a better price. And he goes, and I said, I didn't bring in my credit card. He goes, you want to go get your credit card? I was like, no, I'm not going to do it right now. And then I went back this morning, and
they were there.
Worked out in my favor.
Yep,
so.
And you got the deal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the faith is like it's an absolute knowing. Nothing can talk you out of it. Can you think of times where you've operated in that?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting one. A couple of years ago, I knew I was supposed to take a trip for, this is at RNC, so this is specific to this job, but it was when everything had fallen apart with my business partner and the business, and so this was before I started this job, and I'm taking care of my dad, so I'm completely out of funds, and I knew I was supposed to go, and I thought, well, God, I'm going to get there, and I don't know if I can pay for this trip. I mean, but I knew I was supposed to be there.
Yeah.
And so I was able, I went and traded in my mind, like cashed in some miles and got the plane ticket, and then I knew that when it came time to pay for the room, I would have money coming in, and I could, cover it that way. But I had no other money for anything else. I had no money for the Uber ride. I had from the airport, and so you're going through all these things, but I knew, I'm like, I don't know why God is telling me I've got to be there.
Yeah.
So on the plane, I was thinking about the Lord's Prayer came to me, and I started praying the Lord's Prayer, and it was going to be a very divisive meeting. There was a lot of inner fighting. There was a lot of stuff going on. Well, on the way there, we had a prayer meeting set up with several big, prayer partners coming in, and I was asked if I would lead the closing prayer and pray on unity. And unity was what I've been praying on the plane.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, so I know I'm being sent out there for a reason.
Yeah.
So I get there, and I think I have enough money off of like a gift card to get my Uber ride over to the hotel. I didn't pay for any meals, like all my meals were covered. I ate when everybody else ate. And then when it came time to pray at the big prayer meeting, I told them all, I started talking about unity, and I said, look, I want us to be united in something. I said, so what I would like for us to do, I said, is I'm going to start us with the Lord's Prayer, because we all know that.
Yeah.
So let's say that together, and then I'll pray. And so there were several people that came up to me afterwards, and they were saying, oh my gosh, I think we want to do the Lord's Prayer in the big meeting, when we have the 300 people or whatever. And so I said, yeah, whatever you guys want to do. So anyway, everything was being covered, every step of the trip. And the day I was supposed to go to the airport, I'm thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to cover my Uber trip to the airport? And my friend comes up and she's like, hey, I've already called an Uber. Do you want to ride with us?
Awesome. Yep.
And I'm like, okay. And it was just one of those things where I knew for a fact I was supposed to be there, didn't know that I was going to be leading a unity prayer over everybody and, trying to kind of calm some of the crazy waters.
Yeah.
But every single thing was covered. And I was like, gosh, how's this going to happen? And then with my job, the way that worked is, and we talked about this, it was taking a long time for them to make a decision.
I was embarrassed.
So it was 6 months from the time that I interviewed to the time I was hired. And so all my close friends were like, you need to go find another job, you need to go interview. But in my spirit, I kept hearing, wait. And then they would say, well, did you call? And any other time I would call and say, hey, just checking them. I kept hearing, wait. And I don't know, I'm like, God, this is weird, but okay, I'm just gonna wait. And so 6 months after my interview, the whole time I'm being told to wait, and people are like, you're crazy, you need to go find another job. Lee calls and asks if I'm still interested in the position. But I told Sherri, the reason God was telling me to wait is Lee doesn't like to be rushed. So had I
He
been
takes
calling
his time.
him, and had I been bugging him, it would have, he would have probably got me.
Well, we had that happen. We had that happen, and it disqualified a person.
Yeah, and so I didn't know any of that stuff. But really, it's my morning, I get up, and unless I'm running late, it's my Bible time and prayer journal and all that, and I get that in, and that kind of sets the course for the whole day.
Yeah, that's good. So you had the gift of faith. You also had word of knowledge because you knew you were supposed to go, and then you actually had some working of miracles that were along with the gift of faith. I think when we think of working of miracles, we think of like big stuff like Jesus, raising the dead, or people getting out of wheelchairs. But it's also those where every provision you needed was met. I've been for obvious reasons studying divorce and remarriage. Now I have no desire to remarry, but just I'm writing a book on it, a most joyful anointed divorce, and because that's what the Lord told me it would be, and it was. And so I had no grid for that when he first told me. I'm like, what? But I'm like, okay, what about people that eventually they will want to remarry? Like, what does the Bible actually say about that? So I've been taking this deep dive, and one of the things I learned is in Exodus 21. Like if you look at the Old Testament, the 10 Commandments were the law, right? So it's the law of the land, like our Constitution, and then the other laws in like Exodus and Numbers and all that, they were case law. And, so like, I don't know if I told y'all last week, I've been talking so much lately. I don't know where I've been saying any of this, but where like if in the Old Testament, if you borrowed, say, my computer and then you broke it, well, what's your obligation? Well, based on the law of not to steal, right? The obligation would be to replace my laptop.
You did not talk about that. Just so you know.
So they have the case law. Well, one of the case law was, okay, you don't want to commit adultery, but what if you have, neglect or different things? I mean, is a wife supposed to be with someone abusive or neglecting her or not feeding and clothing her? So in Exodus 21, the case law, the precedent that was set is she must be fed, clothed, and receive conjugal love or love and care. So neglect is an absence of love. And so I was like, man, that is crazy. So when you think about, like I was translating it into the relationship with the Lord, he is under a contract with you to feed and to clothe you and to love you. So when you went at his command to there, his obligation was to pay for your expenses. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, and so I learned, like I was anointed for that meeting. I knew I was supposed to be there. Though I didn't know why starting out. Once it was over, I completely understood why.
Yeah.
But no, that kind of stuff is cool.
Yeah, it is cool.
That happens.
That's good. I love your stories. Okay, so what we're going to do is go to page 4, and we're going to dive into a couple gifts that are maybe a little bit more. I mean, they're gifts, but a couple of them are actually part of the fivefold functions in Ephesians 4:11 and 12. So the apostle and prophet and teachers, those are part of the gifts, which in the original language, it's basically that when Jesus ascended to heaven and sat at the right hand, he then gave gifts to men. And the gifts to us are the apostle, prophet, evangelist, pastor, and teacher, or pastors who teach. So it could be fourfold. The Greek is a little bit weird there. So that means that their job is to equip us for this work of ministry, and that's why they're gifts for us. That way they can teach us how to operate in these things. But here in 1 Corinthians, Paul lists the gifts, and then he gives the order of functions in a couple more gifts. So he says in chapter 12, verses 27 through 28, now you are the body of Christ and members individually, and God has appointed these in the church. First apostles, second prophets, third teachers. After that, miracles, then gifts of healings, helps, administrations, and varieties of tongues, which we kind of talked about that last week a little bit. Okay, so the apostle. The word first there is proton in the Greek. And it's literally first, particularly of place, order, and time, or it's the first in a series, right? So if you have a series of apples, oranges, and bananas, apples is the proton. Now, it's the elementary principle that is positively charged. And I love that definition because the apostle is actually the principal or chief function in the body that the foundation of the church is the apostles and the prophets. Unfortunately, we've seen over the years from the book of Acts where apostles and prophets have actually been displaced, and now it's pastors and teachers and even evangelists. Why would we have those three and not the foundational functions? So, you can get into a lot of religious dogma and argument with people on this stuff. We're just looking at what Paul said, and he said apostles are first. But what I also like is that they're positively charged.
Yeah, that's good.
I like that. It's like apostles by nature can tend to be rough around the edges. They're very visionary. They're only concerned about the kingdom of heaven being brought on earth. We're here to bring the kingdom of heaven to earth. And so people can sometimes be a secondary motive for an apostle, but I love that they're positively charged. That means that they should bring good things. They should bring wisdom. They should bring great teaching. They should bring strategy on how to build. They're master builders, really, is what an apostle is. So they're a positive force. They're also a power force. Now, the apostle is also literally one who is sent with a message. And so Paul had one theme. A lot of people don't realize it. But his one theme was the indwelling of Holy Spirit. He wrote that in Colossians 1, 27, 28. He preached Christ in you, the expectation of glory. Peter, his was maybe a little bit more toward the end time and how to handle persecution, right? So they each had their themes. They're ambassadors. So they're like ambassadors we have today, dignitaries, where they are sent out to represent the country they're sent from. And that's literally what it is. It was a secular term, a secular Greek word that's used to this day to refer to ambassadors. What is interesting with ambassadors, and we do this as well, is they would call them back after 2 years because they didn't want them to adopt the customs and the culture and the heart of the nation they were in. Because then they wouldn't be able to very clearly articulate the message of the leader of the country they were from.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, and that was important, especially back then, because you couldn't just pick up the phone, right? You had to know your king or you had to know your president in order to speak what they would say. And so for us, an apostle, they know the heart of Father. And when they speak, that's the heart. And so I thought that was interesting. Master builders. I put in here, unfortunately, many people believe that the office of apostle no longer exists. Phooey. Until there's a return, there's a tremendous need of apostles, and this false idea of not having them anymore once the early church apostles died means that we've lost our relevance as a body. I mean, apostles just have something special when it comes to making the people of God relevant in all aspects of society. And also it's interesting that, Paul, his function was to get before the Caesar. I mean, he built up the church, the Gentiles in particular. He impacted cities and nations, but his main goal was to get to Nero. And he did. And he preached to Nero. And so they're governmental in the regard as far as their function in the church, but also in interacting with leaders. And you can have an apostolic anointing and not be an apostle. The apostles' function mainly is to equip the saints for the work of ministry, but you can have apostolic people. We should be apostolic. We're sent ones. Now, the prophets, again, that's listed in Ephesians 4. All of these, by the way, require the working of miracles and power. A lot of people don't know that. To equip the saints for the working of ministry. If they're not doing that, they're either not being true to the office, or they're not actually a prophet, or actually even a pastor. There's supposed to be signs and wonders that follow. So a prophet is one of the most misunderstood in the body, I have found. There's definitely the idea of telling beforehand something that's coming. And it can be as simple as you knowing it was going to be foreclosed. Now, your knowledge of that could have been you were just watching and observing, but there could have been an infused inspiration. They're going to foreclose. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's an inspiration. It's just you know something you cannot know naturally, or you can see something and then bam, it hits you. Okay, I know what's going on here. So that can be also a prophetic function, because the word of knowledge, word of wisdom, and prophecy are the revelatory gifts, and they often work together. So when I see people that operate in a strong word of knowledge, I'm, discernment even, I'm usually like, okay, there's probably some prophetic going on. But one of the basic, definition is to foretell future events. But the basic one is one who speaks under divine influence and inspiration, which includes exhorting, reproving, or, get this, threatening of individuals and nations as an ambassador of God and the interpreter of his will to men. So that's in Zodiates, Greek definitions. But where we see this operating the most is in preachers. So preaching is a prophetic gift. A preacher is very different from a teacher. Like right now, this is teaching. I've operated under preaching. It's totally different feel. I don't need notes. I'm more animated, active, movement, things like that. So the preaching, though, where it becomes prophetic, if this has ever happened to you, now you'll know what's going on. Where you go to like a service or you go to a small group or something, and someone's preaching or teaching and they're reading your mail. It's like, do you have a camera in my house? Are you reading my journal?
And then I'm like, God, don't show them too much.
Right? So that's prophetic. That's what's happening. And it can freak people out. They're like, man, I do hope they don't keep going, because they're going to talk about the, tiff I had with my husband on the way here. So that's funny. So a preacher will definitely fit under that category. And by the way, let me just give you this reference so that you have it. I actually got, not into an argument, but I pointed out flawed theology or to a so-called prophet. I didn't agree that he was one. But, okay, let's see. It's in 1 Corinthians 14, and I think it's verse 21. Nope. Okay. Here it is, verse 31. Now he's speaking to the Corinthians, and he says, for you all can prophesy one by one, that all may learn and be encouraged, and the spirit of the prophets are subject to the prophets. And so what that means is that in a church setting, you can all encourage one another. You can all speak an inspired speech. Like I said, sometimes just saying, I just have this overwhelming emotion that God just loves you so much, like and it can just change their whole world, because maybe they never felt loved. It could be something as simple as that. So I think that we sometimes get into this Old Testament idea of Jeremiah and Isaiah, and all of those things. And there is that function, but they're under the new covenant, not the old. So it's a little bit different. The teachers, this is where we get our word doctor. And so it's an instructor or master. And from Zodhiates, it says in the early church, it was the giving of progressive instruction in God's redeeming purpose. That was the primary duty. So they taught the redemption realities of Christ. That was the main role of the teacher back then. Pastors were considered to the early church a subgroup within a larger body of teachers. Okay, so the teacher was, as far as rank, was actually after the evangelist. So every pastor should be able to teach. That's actually a requirement to the early church. One can possess a teaching gift without being in the office, and one can teach without being pastoral. Okay. And again, these offices are supernatural, but where the teacher is interesting is they establish doctrine. And the thing is in James, I think it says, let not many of you become teachers, because if you teach the wrong thing, there's a greater condemnation. Right. That word condemnation in the Greek is a greater chance of going to hell. That's what that literally means. It's not like a spanking.
I know nothing.
You know? Right. And I remember when I was a baby Christian, I could tell I had a gift to teach. And I was like, I don't want anything to do with this. So we've obviously talked about miracles, but I wanted to get into the Greek a little bit, where it's dunamis. Again, we get the word dynamite from. It's a deed manifesting great power of supernatural force. Okay? So all born-again, Spirit-filled Christians, they have the power to work miracles. You'll often see this dominantly working in evangelists. A lot of evangelists have a gift of faith and gifts of healing and miracles. It's also the dunamis power that is over all the exousia of the enemy. So this is really cool. In Luke, and we may have looked at this the last time we were in study, but it's been so long, we might as well just have a little refresher. In Luke 10:19, this is quoted quite a bit. It says, so his disciples came back from ministry, and they're all excited. And he says, behold, I give you the authority to trample on serpents and scorpions and over all the power of the enemy, and nothing shall by any means hurt you. Now, the word power of the enemy, that word is not dunamis. It's exousia. So exousia is, it's like delegated authority. Okay? So like when a cop puts on their badge and gun, that's their exousia. If you see a cop without his badge and gun, he probably doesn't have the authority to arrest you in that moment. Now, he could probably do a citizen's arrest, but he doesn't have his clothing. So we have exousia. It's literally legal jurisdiction in the original language, but so does the enemy. He is the God of the world system, and so he's telling us that the miracle working power on the inside of you trumps any legal jurisdiction the enemy has. And because of that, he can't touch you. And I believe if more Christians believed that, they wouldn't die of sickness. They wouldn't die in car wrecks. You know, like we would have a lot more power when it comes to those types of things. They have gifts of healing we've already talked about. Helps is one of my favorite. It's the ability or the capacity to help or assist. Dorena definitely operates in that, but I think her helps for me is more than God told her to. Because I don't think she had helps, but
Nick is helps too.
100%.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Not only
sure.
is he helps, but he's also the helper personality.
Mm-hmm.
He's an S, so he's got a double whammy there. But I did not know this until I studied this to prepare for our class. The word helps is literally laying hold of or apprehending, and implies some revelatory or perceptive bent. It could be revelation knowledge, although I don't negate the traditional aspect of helping like we see with Nick, but there's also a revelatory bent. So I'm curious, like I wish Nick was actually up here. I'm curious, is he also discerning?
Right.
Is he also perceptive?
I'm going to say yes, just from personal conversations we've had.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it may not be like words of knowledge or discernment of spirits, but it appears from this that those with the helps gift are also very perceptive. And I can see how that'd be needed. Like, not everybody's going to say what they need help with, right?
Right.
But a helper, they're going to be looking and be like, I bet I could help in that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also, I think they could probably read people.
And so, and I think discerning does go along with that.
Mm-hmm.
On my trip, I was watching some people go through the food line, and there weren't any tables left. And I seen this elderly gentleman, and I just knew he couldn't stand for very long, just watching him. So I waited for him to get to the end of the food line, and then I went and got him, and I said, "Are you ready to sit down?" I said, "Because I'm done with my seat, if you would like to come take it." And he looked at me and he said, "You must have noticed my health." And so he didn't know where he was going to sit.
Yeah,
but,
Right.
you were paying attention.
But
watching.
I have a tendency to watch people.
I do too.
And just,
and then you respond.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, administrations is the ability to govern, which I thought was interesting, because when you think of administration, you think of paperwork and...
I would have thought that would be leadership.
Exactly. Which, now on our stuff...
I don't know, though, because administration can also be, like, if you have an administrative assistant, they're not leading, but they're doing all of the organizational work.
Yes, that's
So maybe organizational.
So and I think we get into leadership. Actually, we do. Okay, so here's the difference.
Okay.
So leadership means to steer a ship as well, but this word is to influence others as to cause them to follow a recommended course of action. So leadership are influencers. So with admin, it means to steer a ship, to guide, the ability to lead, but I think it's more in a governmental role, meaning like, okay, this can happen a lot in the marketplace. When you look at Steve Jobs, who's a fascinating character, and he had a obsession with Apple products, with ease of use. Mm-hmm. And no clutter, etc. And so that's what makes his products work so well. It was the experience that he wanted people to feel. Okay, well, what did they do? They fired him. Mm-hmm. And what happened? They put admins in place. What did they do? They made so many products and admined Apple almost to death, where they had to get Steve Jobs back in to save the company, and he eliminated a lot of stuff. So what I have found with admins is they are very focused on the order and how things should be, which is great. But you typically don't want an admin necessarily running an organization that requires innovation.
Yeah.
You know?
That's interesting.
Because once you get past innovation, you're in the rut, you're actually dying. And you have to introduce innovation to stay alive. So maybe that's a little bit of the difference. I do think that there's definitely admin responsibilities. Moses was definitely administrative, definitely leadership, even though he didn't want to be.
It seems like leadership might be more inspirational too.
You know what? And if that's the case, it makes you wonder if Moses was admin, but Miriam and Aaron were inspirational.
Right. Yeah.
I could see that. Influencers. So I'd say leaders are probably influencers.
Yeah.
It also means they have a natural ability to lead. Leading is to be done with diligence, which is to do something with intense effort and motivation, and to do one's best. So maybe that's the difference. But the govern part is interesting, because like we call administration, the Trump administration, the Biden administration. I mean, there's a lot of admin going on there.
Yeah.
And it's government. Do you have any thoughts, Tina? You just look like you're pondering,
Well, I mean, I just see, I see a difference between the people that are leading and the ones that are doing the admin work.
There's
I see
difference.
A complete division.
Yeah.
So, what
but you are determining outcomes,
right,
which is governing.
But the admin's doing the details part, and the leader's inspiring.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah, so the leader's, going to be big picture oriented and visionary, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And then the admins are actually holding the organization together. They're doing all of the things that have to be done.
Yeah. And I would say, like, as far as, like, when I think about my business, I'm curious which one you think are your strongest suits as far as leaders. Is it admin or leadership? Because I usually have a picture. I usually know where I want to go. And I'm usually, like, influencing. The admin stuff, drives me nuts and I miss stuff, but I can do it because I have the C.
Right.
But I don't like it. It's draining. What about you guys?
I'm more visionary.
Okay.
So and this is why I love having Susie Russell, because I can get this idea and then I can call Susie and I'm like, Susie, I need you to work on this.
Yeah. That's why I do with Dorina.
This is what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And this is how I want it to go.
I struggle because I don't have, so like Rocket Fuel by Gino Wickman, the visionary and the integrator.
Yeah.
I'm the visionary.
Yeah.
And I have to force myself into the role of integrator. And I'm always like, I need a person over here. But
to integrate it. Yeah, to get it in place.
I don't have that person right now, so that person is me.
I think, and I agree with you. I think having someone else to help execute the vision is important for visionary type people, because when you're visionary, you start getting another vision before you finish this vision.
You know, I'm kind of thinking, I mean, as y'all are talking, I'm wondering.
But mine came up, administration came up as one of mine. Now I'm like,
and you are a governor. I mean, you do govern.
Yeah.
I'm wondering too, because if I'm more toward admin, because I actually can execute.
Yeah.
I'll get the plan, I'll execute, but I don't like the paper stuff.
Yeah.
Numbers and I mean, I'm learning it, but
I like that. Like I like seeing the numbers. I like
seeing them. I just don't like putting them together.
Right.
Okay, so here's another definition. The Greek word for the spiritual gift administration is kubernesis. It's a unique term that refers to a shipmaster or captain.
Okay.
The literal meaning is to steer or to rule or govern, and it carries the idea of someone who guides and directs a group of people toward a goal or destination.
Somebody who's following the map or the plan.
Yeah, and they're able to organize, direct, and implement. And then leadership. Okay.
Very much follows leadership.
It's closely related to the gift of administration. Interestingly, it's also the spiritual gift of pastor or shepherd. Interesting, because the Greek word for spiritual gift of leadership is prostemi, which is the word for pastor and shepherd, which means to lead, to assist, to protect, and care for others. It's sandwiched between the gifts of giving and mercy. It's placed there intentionally to show that this gift is associated with caring for others. Oh, I'm 100% admin.
No wonder at leadership.
Yeah, never mind. We know now.
That explains
100% admin.
That's funny.
What was your number on leadership?
On leadership, is that the LE?
Yeah.
I've got a 31.
So that's pretty high.
That's pretty high.
So my fourth would have been wisdom. I had a 32 on wisdom.
I love wisdom. I wanted that one.
I just want to be like the meditating monkey, like on the Lion King or whatever, where you just gaining all the, all
you know
the
how you can be
knowledge
that? Sit with your hands like this.
Yes.
And then everyone will think that you're the educated monkey. Oh, that's funny. Huh. Okay. Interesting. So I think we've solved that issue. And then, of course, the tongues. The Greek definition, because we've already discussed it, is an utterance having the form of language but inquiring an inspired interpreter for understanding the content. It's also a static language or speech, and it requires an interpretation if you're in public. I also think missionary tongues falls under that category. So interesting. So I think definitely admin. You know what's funny though with Dorina? She'll chuckle at this. I sent her, because she's a C, so I sent her something to proofread.
Okay.
Looking at the camera, and I'm like, there were so many. I don't know if it's like 3 mistakes. I'm like, how did you miss these? Like, I should miss them. I'm a D, but you're a C. Like, why didn't you spot those? And I can't remember what we came up with. There was something that we came up with. I'm like, well, you're fired. I'm not going to ever have you proofread again. And the other day when I was, the Habit ebook that I developed, I'm like, I need a proofer. And I know one that's good, actually.
I am actually a really good proofreader.
Are you a good proofer?
Yes, it drives me crazy reading books because I'm like, that's a mistake.
I do that too. But when it's my own stuff, I miss stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I might just send it in the draft then, and with the things that I'd like.
I'll read it.
But yeah, it's like, don't send it to me to proofread. She's like, don't do that again. I'm like, I'm not. So, all right. I think that's it. Yeah, next week we're gonna, let me pull it back up real fast.
That's like right on time.
I know.
We're going to, I think, go a little bit deeper, but and then the week after, I'll actually be out of town, recording the True Crime podcast in Texas. So we're going to go in a little bit of the gifts we haven't, like exhortation, giving, mercy. We're going to get into mercy. And then go a little bit into humility and operating in the gifts. Yeah. And then we will go into my 2 favorite. You know what I want to do at the end? You know how we talked about ice cream socials? Mm-hmm. Which are kind of old-fashioned, but like something where people are getting together and stuff. I was like, after we get done with this study, I want to invite everybody to the house to have coffee.
Oh, that would be fun.
And I want to get everybody some of the baby cakes from Meg's New Yorkish.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Don't go there.
Had those.
Don't go there unless you have self-control.
Yeah,
I'm serious.
I don't need to go there.
I'm serious.
I've had her cheesecakes, but I haven't had.
Yeah. Anyway, so I thought it'd be nice, get everybody one of those, and we can just hang out. No study or nothing. Just get to know each other a little bit better. And so that's what I'm gonna do. So, yeah, and we can pick our day or evening, whenever it'll be convenient.